I'm genuinely sad for this country because I feel like the reason that they went ahead with this policy is because, honestly, I feel like they want to win the next election, and I feel like this is a marketing ploy to get people to vote for them and to get them higher up in the polls again, because they're low down in the polls at the minute, the Tories. I'm not even convinced that the Tories themselves think that this will work. I think that they're mostly concerned about losing the votes of the far right. This is how they're advertising their new policies about the people who are crossing the channel in boats. If you come here illegally, you will be removed. I mean, you basically can't come here legally. This doesn't really work with international law, which is what I will get into. I feel like they're really trying to reel back in the UKIP people with this. I don't think it even matters to them that much whether they can actually enforce this or not. I feel like that's a secondary thing to them. Now you've seen us absolutely fuck the economy. Why don't you vote for us on the basis of we'll keep all the brown people out of the country, is basically what they're doing now. What else did they do? Oh my god. Oh, this video. Okay, I'll just play this. Oh.
1,000 migrants have crossed the Channel to the UK in just one day.
The Home Secretary and I have studied every aspect of this issue in detail, and we can now set out 5 new steps today.
At least 400.
Have we considered building a wall? Well, we already don't have to deal with as many refugees as the rest of Europe because we are surrounded by what is essentially a wall, i.e. water, sea. We're already in a position where we don't have to deal with as many people, but they're still like, oh no, we need far less here. The way that the Tories like to sell this is they put out numbers. They always say, oh, this many thousand people have applied for asylum in this country over the last year. But when you compare it with how many other EU countries are dealing with, we're actually not dealing with that many. But they always like to try and make it sound as bad as possible when it's really not that bad, because we're a country surrounded by water. So why would you choose to get in a boat, to get in an extremely unsafe dinghy and risk your life to get to this country when you could actually get to a safe country without having to do that? But they make it sound like they're so desperate to come here because our welfare state is so great, when actually it's not. It's not very generous at all. But ironically, like, that's how the British Empire got so big in the first place, because we are an island surrounded by water, and we were in a position many hundreds of years ago to build up a navy which colonized many other countries, and that's why we're in a privileged position right now. And now we're using that exact same position as an island surrounded by water to say, hey, you shouldn't come here because it's too dangerous.
At risk of harm.
If this is the fucking Tory propaganda at this point, this is like over a year before the next general election. How bad is it gonna be just before the election? If this is what they're fucking doing right now. That they've got from Afghanistan. From what I understand, they've allowed 22 people from Afghanistan to arrive legally. Fucking crazy, isn't it? So this is what Rishi put out. Today I am introducing new measures to deliver on our promise to tackle illegal immigration. You're announcing a new deal with Albania to speed up the return of Albanian asylum seekers, who make up a third of those arriving to the UK by small boats. They're really concentrating on the Albanian ones. And the Albanian asylum seekers are, from what I understand, a special case. Because like the reasons that people from Albania come to the UK and other European countries is kind of different from the reasons that people come from other European countries. Because I don't think you can count Albania as war-torn, but what you can count Albania as is an extremely corrupt country. But yeah, a lot of this is down to they're really concentrating on the Albanian immigrants because they're able to label the Albanian immigrants as like not real refugees because you can't count Albania as like war-torn. But Albania is an extremely corrupt country. So basically they're really sort of hyper-focusing on Albanian refugees. Most of them don't get granted because they're deemed to have come from a safe country, which, you know, it might be technically safe, but at the same time, their country is extremely corrupt. So it's like, where do you draw the line? How do you draw the line between who deserves asylum and who doesn't? Like, if a country's not war-torn, it can still be extremely corrupt. I find the Albanian thing really interesting, to be honest. They're still being exploited by the massively corrupt government in their country, which is why so many of them are attempting to get out and get to other countries. But because they're not technically war-torn, they're like, oh, well, we can use them to, like, say that there are loads of people coming from Albania who aren't really true refugees. I feel like Ros Atkins breaks things down quite well.
Albania is in southern Europe. It has a population of 2.8 million. The UK government describes it as safe and prosperous. But prosperity is relative. Albania's median hourly wage in 2018.
Exactly. That's the phrase right there. Prosperity is relative. The median hourly wage in Albania is €1.70. So they're like, we will allow people in due to modern slavery laws. Is that modern slavery to be giving people the minimum hourly wage of €1.70?
In the UK, it was 9 times higher. And one global poll in 2018 found that 60% of Albanian adults wanted to leave. The only countries where that figure was higher were Haiti, Liberia and Sierra Leone. Recent data shows that 14% of asylum claims from Albanian men are successful. So the vast majority of Albanian men either never see their claim through or are rejected. It is, though, a different story for Albanian women and children. 90% of their asylum claims are granted. And while the politicians exchange opinions, it remains true that the number of Albanian men coming to the UK has changed. So has the way the UK and Albania deal with this. The Home Office notes, since signing our returns agreement with Albania in 2021, we've removed more than 1,000 Albanians. But as the boats keep coming, this issue remains both a practical and a political challenge, as well as an ordeal for those who need safe haven.
Albania has a really interesting history as a country. They had a completely communist government for a very long time, and then they moved on to a free market government. But when they moved to a free market government, to a free market economy, basically the entire country got overtaken by various pyramid schemes, to the point where so many pyramid schemes took over Albania, to the point that a civil war started because people lost so much money in these pyramid schemes that they all turned against the government, because the government were basically backing up these pyramid schemes because there was no regulation to their central bank. There was nothing stopping them from starting up pyramid schemes. The history of Albania is really interesting to me. Even though they've gone past the whole pyramid scheme thing now, they've still got a massively corrupt government, and they've still got a lot of problems that are blighting them right now. If they were doing the same things in the UK, you'd absolutely think that the Albanian government was violating human rights if they were doing the same thing here. In 2020, 50 arrived, 2021, 800, 2022, 12,000 arrived. The figure for 2022 accounted for 28% of arrivals in small boats, which is somewhat less than the 1/3 suggested by the Prime Minister. So, like, most of them are coming from Albania, and they're basically trying to say, well, these aren't real refugees. But they are fleeing, I guess, economic hardships, which are so bad that they're making them attempt to cross the channel in tiny little boats. How many Albanian migrants are granted asylum? In 2022, 85% of Albanians who arrived by small boats submitted asylum applications. Only 68 of them, or 0.7%, have received an initial decision, and none were granted refugee status or another type of leave to remain. They kind of think that the single men that come over, they assume that they're only coming over to earn more money than they would in their country. Around 40% of people leave Albania for economic opportunities. They cited corruption, low salaries, poor working conditions, and a low quality of life as their main reasons. So many people are being fucked over. I don't believe that Albanian people aren't being fucked over, you know? I don't believe Albanian people are not being fucked over if they're going through that much to come here to try and make a better life. I'm going to look at whether the immigration bill breaks international law. It basically does. They're trying to get around it.
On Tuesday, Home Secretary Suella Braverman introduced a new bill into Parliament which aims to address illegal migration to the UK. Specifically, those attempting to illegally enter the UK via the Channel on small boats. Last year, the Home Secretary introduced the Nationalities and Borders Act. Announcing the then bill, the then Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said that anyone who arrives illegally will be deemed inadmissible and either returned to the country they arrived from or a safe third country. And this actually sounds very similar to what the current Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, had to say about the bill early this week.
They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Yeah. Removed back to your country if it's safe, or to a safe country, a safe third country like Rwanda.
Why Rwanda? They managed to draw up an agreement with Rwanda where they would basically pay Rwanda to take some asylum seekers who had applied to stay in our country. In Australia, the cheapest option by far was letting people board them. We chose to keep them in concentration camps on tiny Pacific islands because it's cruel, not because of the cost. Yeah, that's what I read about when I researched my climate change video. Nothing had ever made me so fucking sad in my entire life than researching my climate change video and researching how Australia treated asylum seekers and what happened to them, because the Australian government realised that they could basically get votes out of not allowing asylum seekers onto the Australian shore. So what they did was they intercepted the boats before they got onto the Australian shore and they sent them off to islands. And on these islands, these refugees were just basically abused. Their human rights were just like completely violated to the point where they just mistreated them so badly. And then people went legitimately crazy because they were treated that badly. And then they used the actions that they did because they'd been mistreated badly, like the crazy things that they did because they were that fucked up from the mistreatment, to say, oh, well, these are crazy people, therefore you shouldn't let them into the country because they're crazy people. I legitimately think that the UK government are taking inspiration from that. They're eventually going to get to the point where we're like, we're not even going to let them touch the shore, because we know that as soon as they touch the shore of our country, that gives them rights. And we don't want to give them rights. We're not even going to let the boat arrive. What we're going to do is divert the boat, and therefore we don't even need to process their asylum applications. That's what Australia did, and I feel like that's literally what the UK is trying to do. They're still letting them arrive here on the shore at this point, but they're eventually going to get to the point where they're like, oh, we're not even going to let the boats arrive here. We're going to just immediately divert them to Rwanda. Yeah, a part of me thinks that they know that with climate change, this is going to get so much fucking worse. And it will. Unless action is literally taken right now to not drill any oil out of the earth, which we know is not going to happen, let's be honest, we're going to have catastrophic changes to the entire economy, global economy, from climate change. And that's going to cause many people in third world countries initially to become climate refugees. And I feel like they know that. And that's why they're putting all of this into place. Because they know that climate refugees are going to get way more numerous in the next few decades unless major changes are made right now, which they know won't happen. So they're thinking, well, how can we combat this right now? How can we make our borders stronger right now? You know, because capitalism has ruined the entire world. Take a drink, everyone.
Let's move to discussing what the new illegal migration bill sets out to do. Fundamentally, this new bill changes the way that the UK's asylum system works. Under the new bill, anyone arriving in the UK illegally will no longer have the right to claim asylum, and the government will now have the power to simply remove them to a safe third country without even having to process their asylum claim. The UN's Refugee Agency has stated that it's profoundly concerned about the bill and that it amounts to an asylum ban, which, according to them, is a clear breach of the Refugee Convention. And this opposition is understandable and to be expected, given that the UN actually has an issue with this whole approach to immigration. In fact, in the past, they've pointed out that this first safe country principle, one that undermines the Tory government's approach, is both unworkable and defies international law. And in fact, the bill may also break the European Convention on Human Rights. And to be clear, it's not just critics saying this. It's the government themselves. On the very first page of the bill, the government are required to state whether the bill is compatible with the convention. And for the first time in about a decade, they stated that it probably isn't. This is the government openly admitting to breaking international commitments. So, with the government being accused left, right and centre of breaking international laws and celebrating ending protections for modern slavery, their battle to get this through the Commons and onto the statute book has only just begun. And it's an issue which isn't likely to go away very quickly.
It does seem like it just breaks international law. Basically, it's such a fucking grey area as to whether this would fucking go through anyway. This article breaks it down. How does the bill fit in with existing human rights legislation, and will it be challenged? Suella Braverman on Tuesday was unable to confirm if the bill is compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, but the government inserted what is called a Section 19(1)(b) section into the bill, which indicates that the government intends to proceed. Alexander Horn, a former parliamentary lawyer, described such a statement as a big, flashing red light. He said, let's say that this bill gets on the statute book and is found to be problematic. What you're eventually doing is saying, well, the domestic courts will issue a declaration of incompatibility, saying that this isn't compatible with our convention rights. But because it's primary legislation, they can't overrule it. They just have to go along with it. Horn said that the right to family life, Article 8, was the most likely convention right to be the subject of a challenge, but others were also possible, such as the prohibition of degrading inhuman treatment. Charlie Welton, Policy and Campaigns Officer at Liberty, said the fact that in the past the government had not resorted to 19(1)(b) in the past flags up that this will absolutely, without any doubt whatsoever, be challenged. But there remains the suspicion among lawyers that the government is setting up a confrontation with lefty lawyers and Strasbourg, who they can then blame for failure to implement the measures. Horn said it was highly unlikely to be on the statute books for the next election. If you ask me, this isn't a legal opinion, it's entirely a sort of political view. He, Rishi Sunak, is doing this to generate headlines. I think the government thinks that banging on about Strasbourg is a new version of banging on about Europe. If you look at the way that they implemented the whole Rwanda rehoming scheme originally, it went so fucking wrong, but they definitely buried that. I don't think people realise how fucking disastrous the whole fucking Rwanda thing went. Right from the beginning. And I feel like they're hoping the same thing will happen with this, where it'll all just be buried. They'll use it as marketing to be like, oh yeah, the Tories are like really in control of our borders, when really they're not actually going to do much because they can't, because it would be in violation of international law. They can pretend that they're trying to do something. So if you look at like how this was legally challenged, two campaign groups joined the PCS Union and for asylum seekers to challenge the plan in the High Court and request a last-minute injunction to stop the first flight from taking off on 14th of June 2022. However, on the 10th of June 2022, the High Court refused to grant the injunction requested. At 7:30 on the day of the planned flight, the European Court of Human Rights issued an interim measure which stated that one of the 7 passengers, an Iraqi man, would face a real risk of irreversible harm if he was transported to Rwanda. That interim measure led the other 6 passengers to appeal. The removal orders were scrapped and the flight was cancelled. After the ECHR invention, some political figures called for the UK to leave the ECHR. The High Court of the United Kingdom ruled that the British government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda while their application is ongoing is lawful. This Rwanda thing has been going on for quite a while. It's not been successful. People have successfully appealed against being sent to Rwanda for various reasons. I don't know. I feel like this whole thing right now is just really push it to make it seem like we're keeping people out of the country and therefore we'll get all of them UKIP votes that we did back in the Brexit days and all of the racist people will carry on voting for us. I feel like that's what they're trying to do because they can't really get votes based on any other policies right now. Like they can't be like, oh, look at what a great job we've done with the economy, guys. Why don't you vote for us again? They can't use that marketing ploy with anything else because they've fucked up everything else at this point. I feel like the only thing that they've got left to jump onto to try and keep people on their side is actual pure racism. I mean, I feel like they're playing on the whole great replacement theory, which is what a lot of them really play on. The actual very far right people, that's what they're most worried about, is the whole great replacement thing. And I feel like the Tories are definitely dog whistling that in ways desperately to try and keep in power at this point by sort of implying that people can scam their way into this country by whatever means necessary. It is depressing, but it's worth remembering that we barely take on any asylum seekers when we compare ourselves to the rest of the EU. To the rest of Europe as a whole, we rank number 19 in how many that we take on. So all of the stats are available here. Further down on here is where we rank in relation to other European countries. Number of asylum applicants and grants of asylum, the UK and the EU. So we're number 4 in applicants. If you change it to per 10,000 of population, we literally go down to that number. So we're 19th in number of applicants of asylum in the EU plus. So where do we come when it comes to the amount of people granted? Oh, we're 18th now. We're 18th. The amount of people that we've granted asylum per 10,000 population of the country. But yeah, everyone's coming here because our welfare state is just so fucking generous, guys. That's why people want to come here, because it's so fucking generous. Oh, God. If you look up the numbers of asylum statistics on the actual UK Parliament website, they'll say all of these numbers like, yeah, we've taken in this many people. Oh my God, it's so difficult. Oh, the numbers have gone up so much. And they kind of do like make us look quite good. You have to scroll down all the way to the European context where they say in 2021, there were around 9 asylum applications for every 10,000 people living in the UK. Across the EU 27, there were 14 asylum applications for every 10,000 people. The UK was therefore below the average among EU countries for asylum applications per head of population, ranking 16th among EU 27 countries plus the UK on this measure. Which means basically we take way less asylum applications than the rest of these EU countries to begin with. Anyway, way fucking less. Because people have to get in boats to get here. And most of them don't want to do that. I need to fucking pour myself another beer.